Episode 3, A Spark of Green Light. Luigi did not quite know why he was walking away from the dingy bar towards the gang of bullies. It was almost as if his feet were moving on their own. One of the Koopas poked the Yoshi in the head, giggling. The Yoshi snarled, but could do nothing to help himself as he was still restrained by the powerful charging Chuck. The sight was enough to make Luigi, who had been a rather mild-mannered person even before he had become so subdued, begin to get angry. This bright, brave young man's hopes and dreams were about to be crushed. Just like the Koopa Empire had done many times before. It wasn't fair and he knew it. Luigi adjusted his lopsided cap. It was still a bright, spotless green. Luigi had never sunk so slow as to stop caring for his perfect appearance and start looking like a tramp. Back in the day he had been known around the castle as the more gentlemanly brother, compared to the blunt and hot-blooded Mario. One of the Koopas noticed him.
"Hey, look, it's that weirdo,"
he commented, pointing at him while glancing at the charging Chuck.
"Isn't he supposed to be some big deal?"
The charging Chuck shrugged. He was clearly more interested in tormenting the struggling Yoshi than looking at Luigi.
"I guess,"
he said.
"Never paid that much attention in the military academy. He looks kind of familiar." "Shelgo, you're probably mistaken,"
the third Koopa sighed.
"He's just some loser dressed like Mario. He couldn't even get the colors right. Come on, are we gonna throw this kid into the piranha patch or not?" "All right, that settles it,"
Luigi said aloud, feeling a spark of fire run through his veins.
"Why can't anybody ever remember me?"
It was the first time Luigi had felt inspired to do anything following Mario's death. He had forgotten how good it felt.
"Why should we remember you?"
Shelgo asked cockily, shoving the Yoshi down to the ground.
"What do you ever do?" "I'll show you,"
Luigi shouted, leaping forward. He dashed across the brown cobblestone, his brown boots lightly stepping across the ground almost as if he wasn't touching it at all. In less than a second, he was right in front of Shelgo. The Koopa Troopa had no time to react. Luigi slammed his fist into the Koopa's fast, sending him flying 3 meters to crash into an abandoned toad house. The Yoshi's eyes widened in astonishment. So did the eyes of the charging Chuck and remaining Koopa, who immediately stopped what they were doing and went into sloppy defensive stances. Luigi twisted his body around before springing nimbly into the air. The 3 people below him watched him with awestruck, confused expressions, the enemies seemingly forgetting to even fight back. He came down upon the Koopa, smashing him into his shell. Quick as a flash, he ducked under one of the charging Chuck's punches, scooped up the shell, and hurled it at the muscular Koopa's chest. The force of the projectile was enough to knock him back, causing him to collapse on the ground heavily. By the time the 3 bullies had managed to get up, they were on the run, dashing away from Luigi as fast as their legs could carry them. Luigi paused to catch his breath. Toad Town was silent and peaceful sounding again. His limbs kind of ached. 20 whole years without any significant athletic exercise could really do something to you. As he relaxed his legs, he took a look at the young Yoshi, who was slowly getting onto his feet. He looked as if Rosalina herself had just descended down from the stars above him.
What in the world was that?"
he gasped, looking over Luigi. Luigi awkwardly adjusted his cap. He felt the Yoshi's scrutinizing gaze burning into him. It wasn't often that he was the subject of this much admiration.
"Just a little something I learned a while back,"
he said humbly, turning away, before looking back and giving the Yoshi a smile.
"Stay away from the Koopas, okay?"
As Luigi began walking down the road, to exactly where, he wasn't sure, he became aware of a warm feeling in his chest. For the first time in, well, ages, he had actually been a little more than a waste of space. Maybe he ought to do things like this more often.
No.
Luigi told himself, remembering with a shudder the terrible explosion which had claimed his brother's life.
I'll just end up like Mario. There's no way he'd want his bro to die.
Luigi looked up at the sky, gazing at the puffy white clouds drifting lazily above. At least he had done something more than he had done the last 2 decades. If Mario was watching over him right now, he'd certainly be proud. Right? As Luigi continued his idle stroll, he heard the sound of someone calling him.
Hey! Come back here!
The voice was stern, and somewhat stubborn sounding. He recognized it as the voice of the Yoshi.
Huh?
Luigi asked, turning around. The Yoshi was walking towards him, an intense look in his eyes. He didn't look angry, exactly. But he didn't look as if he was simply going to shower him with more praise and compliments.
What is it?
He asked cautiously.
I saved you from the Koopas. Aren't you okay? Yeah, sure I'm okay.
The Yoshi said quickly.
But what kind of a guy do you think I am? Do you think I'm going to simply head back to my shack and count my blessings? Not a chance. I haven't seen anybody stand up to the Koopas like that. Even the tough guys around town steer clear of them.
He took a few steps forward. Luigi could see he was very passionate. That wasn't an expression he saw often on people in Toad Town. Most of the people he saw looked either very defeated or very shifty.
What's your name?
He asked. Luigi debated about how he could answer the question, before deciding on the truth. There was no harm in it, really. This impulsive young Yoshi was obviously not going to try to bring him in.
My name is Luigi.
He responded.
I'm Mario's brother.
A few expressions flashed on the Yoshi's face, first shock, then excitement, then confusion.
I knew Mario had a brother.
He puzzled, more to himself than Luigi.
But isn't he dead? If I'm lying, how come I was able to beat up those Koopas like that?
Luigi replied, feeling more than a little irritated at the Koopa for distrusting him. The Yoshi nodded.
Well, if you're alive, how come they're still here?
He asked, giving Peach's castle, adored with the black flags of the Koopa Empire, a distasteful glance.
You must be at least half as good as Mario was.
The Yoshi's words cut through Luigi like a knife. He had had 20 years to get over Mario's death. Was he still, after all these years, afraid? He had gone through multiple haunted houses stuffed with ghosts to save his brother. Why couldn't he have faced down an empire composed of the enemies he was familiar with to save his kingdom? If it had been him dead and Mario alive, his brother would have still got the job done. He really was the weaker of the two, after all.
I don't.
The Yoshi snorted.
Then you're pathetic.
He said distastefully, turning away from Luigi.
You're tougher than probably anyone in the Mushroom Kingdom and all you do is guzzle down bootleg Chuck Cola down at Shroomers. What a disappointment. That old dork Toad Bird cares more about the kingdom than you do.
He began to walk down the street in the direction of where the fight had taken place, not looking back at Luigi. Luigi felt crushed. He had felt so much like his old self after beating those Koopas. No, he wasn't going to let go of that feeling yet.
Hey!
He called out towards the Yoshi, waving his white-gloved hand to catch his attention. The Yoshi turned around, glaring at Luigi.
What?
He asked scornfully.
Come back.
He asked.
Maybe we can work something out.
A couple minutes later, Luigi and the Yoshi were walking down a path together, the bright green leaves of the nearby forest shading their heads. Since he didn't know where else to go, Luigi was heading towards his house, the Yoshi beside him. As the comforting shade cooled his skin, he began to talk to the Yoshi.
If we're going to discuss Toad Town, I think I should know a little bit about you first.
Luigi decided, glancing down at his companion.
What's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? The name's Cobal.
The Yoshi replied, not meeting Luigi's eye. He could tell that the young reptile was still annoyed by his cowardly attitude.
I was born here, in Toad Town, 18 years ago.
Luigi nodded sadly. This Yoshi had never known the happy days before Bowser's conquest. No wonder he was so rebellious against the Koopa forces.
Old man Toad Bird takes care of me.
Cobal continued.
My mom's dead and my father's in prison. The story is he tried to start a riot down at Mushroom City. He never stood a chance. Are things bad at Mushroom City?
Luigi asked curiously. He had been so out of it he had never really bothered to pay attention to how the kingdom outside Toad Town was faring, let alone the world.
Boy, you've really been hiding yourself away from everything.
Cobal scoffed, glancing up at him.
Mushroom City is the Koopa Empire's main base of operations in the Mushroom Kingdom. It's where the governor, some dude called General Flame, gets his orders directly from Bowser's castle. Nobody goes in there unless they're with the Koopas or they're looking for trouble.
I see. Luigi nodded. He really had missed a lot, that was a pretty important detail. He had never heard of this General Flame person before, he had to be a new face, somebody who hadn't been too high up back when the Mario brothers were in their prime. Cobal continued his story.
I do odd jobs around town, mostly. They only get me a couple coins here and there, plus anything extra I get if I'm lucky enough to find a block. That's pretty much all there is know about me. Thanks to those stinking Koopas, I've never really got a chance to do much.
They had come to the edge of the path, where Luigi's house stood before them, a quaint little cottage in the middle of the clearing. The word Mario was still displayed above the door in bright red letters. Luigi had recently painted it over last month, to ensure that nobody who stumbled across the house would ever forget who had once lived there. Cobal stopped short.
This was his place, wasn't it?
He asked, turning to Luigi before looking over the house again. He took a few steps forward up the small winding path towards the wooden staircase leading up to the house's deck, and its door.
It's pretty simple. My bro wasn't anything special.
Luigi stated with fond recollection, picking up pace to join them as they began walking towards the door.
He never would have like a super classy looking place.
The two walked up the wooden staircase and reached the door. Luigi turned the handle and the two of them walked inside the cottage. The Mario Brothers house had only 2 rooms, plus the secret basement Luigi had built many years ago to write his diary in. One of the rooms contained the kitchen and living space, while the other was the brothers' bedroom. The entire place was extremely tidy, right down to the 2 hammers hanging on the walls placed there for convenience.
Why don't you make yourself at home?
Luigi asked. Really, he wasn't quite sure what he had in mind. He wasn't going to abandon this headstrong Yoshi youth, but he wasn't sure what he was going to do with him. He was really making things up as he went along right now, and that had never been his strong suit.
Here, I'll start brewing a pot of Koopa tea.
He strode to the kitchen, motioned to Cobal to come sit on one of the comfortable-looking red couches in the living area which faced the modest TV.
Sure.
Cobal nodded. He didn't seem too into the idea, which sort of offended Luigi. He had always thought of himself as quite an excellent brewer of tea. Even the princess had liked it, when she had had access to the most luxurious blends in the kingdom.
Listen, Luigi.
he said from across the room as Luigi opened up one of the cupboards, taking out a couple turtley leaves.
I didn't come here for a nice chat, or some life advice, or anything like that. I want some action. Action?
Luigi asked, putting the turtley leaves in a bowl and glancing back at the Yoshi while absent-mindedly crushing them.
You must be mistaken. I'm not really an action kind of guy. You beat those creeps pretty good.
Cobal insisted.
You're probably the most action-ready guy in Toad Town.
He rose to his feet, glancing around the house. His eyes fell upon a wooden hat stand. Specifically at a certain red cap which was hanging there, perfectly free of dust.
You gotta get this, Luigi,
he said, as Luigi put the crushed leaves into a bowl and filled it with hot water.
I saw how down you looked when I mentioned my age. I've never known they good old days that everyone talks about. I don't wanna live my life dodging the Koopa Troop soldiers. How about you help us chase those creeps clear out of Toad Town?
Honestly, the idea had quite a bit of appeal to Luigi. He hated the thought of Bowser's forces living in Peach's castle, messing with the beautiful architecture and elegant decorations Princess Peach had so prized. Still, he had to be realistic, though. They weren't just dealing with the Koopa Kingdom anymore. They were dealing with an entire empire that had subjugated the entire Mushroom Kingdom and Bean Kingdom, along with probably the rest of the world. There would certainly be consequences to his actions.
It's not that simple,
Luigi said, putting down the bowl of tea mixture.
If we cause trouble here, soon everyone's going to be onto us. So what?
Cobal shrugged.
You're Mario's brother. The Mario's brother. You have to know a few tricks, right?
Once again, Luigi found himself thinking about Mario. Almost as if his brother was right next to him, just like before when he was standing next to Shroomers. This time, however, he only needed to think about it for a second. He knew exactly what Mario would do in this situation. Besides, he couldn't ignore the little feeling of pride he felt knowing Cobal had that much trust in his abilities.
Oh. Okay.
Luigi said, walking across the room and sitting down on the couch.
Let's run through this.
He shuddered, not wanting to think about the dread consequences this very un-Luigi-like activity he was about to engage in could bring.
Exactly how protected is this town by Bowser's forces?